Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Esposito, and I'm thrilled to have Kristin Bentz joining me today for this Retail Reset conversation. Kristin Bentz and I have been LinkedIn friends for a while. She's been a great contributor to some of our stories around the financial markets, the performance of public companies, branding, and so much more. So I'm really excited to have her on today to talk about some of the new developments around, public retailers, what we can expect as far as financial market performance. And I think there's a connection to some branding implications as well, as consumer behaviors change, as their needs and expectations change, because at the end of the day, they're all connected, right? So Kristin, I'm really excited to have you on the line today. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh my God, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to chat. So let's go.
Great. So you obviously have a very rich history in finance, but you're also passionate about branding too. So to kick off our conversation, I think having that context around, your history and where you're at today would be helpful. So why don't you share a little bit about you and, your company, KB Advisory Group?
Sure. Well, I have a very long history with retail. So I actually came out of the Neiman Marcus training program way back in the day. So I'm an industry person that picked up finance along the way. So I worked with everyone from Walmart to Neiman's to Richemont to Rolex to Gucci to Gap. From there, I became a retail analyst. I worked for Lehman Brothers. I was the managing editor for TheStreet.com for real money. And then I pivoted into my own business. First, it was talentedblonde.com. And then now I've pivoted into a new business, which is KB Advisory Group. And so I provide strategic advisory to companies, brands, and family offices.
Great. So I do want to kick off our conversation by going back into that, that analyst and finance side of your history and your knowledge, because there is a lot that's going on right now, around, looming bankruptcies, bankruptcy announcements, retailers missing their bond payments, a lot going on. I guess my question for you is, given the headlines, who's involved, and, who are facing these forks in the road, so to speak, are there any surprises as far as the names, the retailers that are included in the mix right now?
Not really. And, it's difficult because as an analyst, you have to analyze the data. And sometimes the data isn't good, and that's just reality. So no one is immune from this. No retailer is immune from this. And truthfully, anyone that tells you where they know this is going is a liar. No one knows. The allure to me about retail itself is its Darwinian nature, right? Survival of the fittest, and the best and strongest brands will survive. And so a lot of these retailers that are going under and declaring should have declared a long time ago, and their wounds were self-inflicted. These are companies that have become irrelevant, that haven't kept up with consumer behavior, consumer preferences. So this is just kind of the last, death knell to wipe out these irrelevant brands. And it's sad, but sometimes brands have to die, and we move on, and we, initiate new plans and new behavior. And really it's the response. When you have something like this, which is a hysteresis, a one-time, non-reoccurring, really forceful event that happens to the economy and to the consumer behavior, it's how you respond to that crisis and how you respond to that change. So the brands that are willing and able and have the cash position, quite frankly, and the data analytics to move on nimbly, those will be the ones that survive.
Oh, that's great. And you kind of made mention of where I'm going next with our conversation, and that's around, the possible longevity of the aftershock of all this. I mean, obviously the markets have been a bit up and down even before COVID-19 even hit. Like you said, these retailer issues aren't exactly new news per se. It's just there's been an acceleration of events. So what's your take as far as, where you think the financial market, the public market is going, and what can we expect from a time span perspective?
God, that's $1 million question. I would be on an island somewhere if I knew that, but I will take a stab at that. I think we're going to be in the Walmazon economy going forward. Okay. And it is a land grab right now for eyeballs and your front doorstep. and the parking lot where you're picking up your groceries, click and collect. So Amazon and Walmart are really going to take and seize that market share because they're large enough, they're fast enough, they're nimble enough. So those are the first two pillars of the new economy going forward. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just the way it's going to be. I think you're going to have a lot of attrition in apparel, a lot of attrition in footwear. Cosmetics is an interesting thing that we can talk about too. There's a big short going on right now with cosmetics, but I'm a contrarian. And I believe with all of these calls that we're doing and the way that business will change, and also how consumers want to feel better about themselves, I think skincare and cosmetics will actually uptick a little bit. Personal care, self-care, and also, sanitation, keeping clean, keeping healthy. I think you're going to see a renewed focus on health and wellness also.
Love that. So there are a few things there that I think we can dig a little bit deeper into. So your first point around Amazon and Walmart, I think, again, that has just been they've both been present forces, companies that have been able to innovate successfully, bolster their omni capabilities, especially, and they've been ramping up very strategically, very quickly in order to adapt to some new realities. But are there any other brands that you think have been doing this rather well, possibly in other categories that, maybe other brands should take a page from their playbook for the future, so to speak?
Well, from a stock perspective and investing perspective, the companies that I'm really paying attention to that have really fared well or less bad than a lot of other companies are Starbucks, Nike, Apple, Peloton. The way that they have responded to their consumer, and no one is better at the psyche of the consumer or their consumer than Nike. Companies that have very large exposure to Asia, I've been watching in particular, because as China comes out of this, they're going to be the first to enter back into consumption. So large multinational brands that know how to manage that, they already have a playbook. So Nike, I think 80 or 90% of their stores are back online. Same with Starbucks. And also, this is kind of a luxury end play, but LVMH. The way they've responded to this has really been brilliant. And Bernard Arnault is a fantastic merchandiser and manager and CEO. And if he doesn't make a few acquisitions here, I would be very, very surprised. But that Chinese consumer, there will be revenge buying. There will be pent-up demand. So I watch those first. And then they have a playbook for how to reopen in the United States. So they'll be much more successful. Nike already has a playbook. Starbucks always has a playbook. I do like Peloton here. I was a contrarian before any of this pandemic stuff came out. And I think going forward, the gym space is going to be very, very vulnerable and very precarious. So you can hate the company all you want, but if you're home and you're stuck and you can't go outside and you can't work out, that's going to be a really great play.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought that up because I know we actually tweeted about this before. Because, I know I personally have been keeping an eye on that space as someone who likes to work out. I'm kind of a bit of go in and go out. Like I don't even want to. I'm not a socializer when I work out.
Me too.
Now people don't really have an option. So a lot of interest around Peloton. Mirror is another one that I've been keeping an eye on. But what's been interesting for me is the long tail of that. So we're seeing brands like Lululemon doing their own classes, which is something that made their store so successful, right? So now they're bringing that digitally, and we're just seeing this overall transition to live streaming, to FaceTiming, service appointments. So what role is that going to be playing in the long-term view of brand strategy, building possibly new revenue models? I guess looking at it through the lens of like digital content creation, but also the more digital form of service and interaction.
Well, that's going to have to be at the forefront. So these brands that we're talking about were pretty successful with their customer base and had a brand ecosystem like Lulu, like Nike, like Peloton. So if they had it before, and Nike really went heavy into their digital arm, especially in Asia when all this happened. So their sales really didn't take a hit as badly as anyone else did in China, which was unbelievable in my opinion. So going forward, they have that ecosystem and they have a culture. And I think that stickiness and developing that in a content creation format, in a digital format, Because, one of my big calls as an analyst was experiential retail. We talked about Glossier. Okay, well, what happens when you can't go to that flagship store? What happens when you can't go to the Lulu studio? That was a critical element in their brand identity and their brand DNA. So how are you going to reach that consumer? So the content creation and being sticky and communicating with your customer and constantly giving them new content, but also thoughtful content is really going to be important going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very seamless connection to the beauty and self-care category, which you said has some pretty fascinating things going on now. So is this also going to be accelerating, experience innovation within that category? Because I'm thinking about, what Chanel did for their holiday pop-up, how they used AR. Of course, again, that was more in-store based, but is there opportunity to digitize that? I mean, what kind of moves do you expect to see within that category? Because it is so rich with possibility right now.
Well, the thing that's so interesting to me about the cosmetic space is, Estee Lauder founded her company with personal touch, literally putting product on women, and she was the first person to do that. And then, we saw the demise of the cosmetics counter with Sephora, opening it up and having testing and having high touch and that sort of thing. And it'll be interesting going forward to see how we maintain that. I think Chanel, the LVMH brands are very, very nimble. They weren't. In fact, the luxury goods space and the French in particular were very late to the game digitally. Hermes, their site was terrible. Burberry was wonderful and very innovative. But I think with cosmetics, they're going to have to really develop a way to digitize that experience. And, I was having a conversation with someone at a debate about the cosmetic space, and they were saying, oh, no one's going to work and everyone has a mask on. No one's going to wear anything. Everyone I know that's a female, like under 50, is watching James Charles videos on YouTube and TikTok. And, my daughter is sitting there trying to do false eyelashes. She's 11. So I think that stay at home, tutorial type of thing with cosmetics, I think there's something there. You may not be going out, but you still want to feel good about yourself. And I think the longer people stay home, they're definitely going to want to experiment and, how long can I wear leggings? Like literally, like how long?
Right. So, and they have nothing to lose at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, eventually you're going to have to do something. I think hair color, home hair color and grooming, especially, you're going to see a lot of that. But from a digital space, in fact, on the luxury side, the Swiss timepieces, that was a big part of my history and where I came out of. And so they pulled out of all of these very large jewelry and watch shows in Switzerland. Well, when you think about a timepiece, that's a very personal thing that you're purchasing, and being there and touching it and seeing it and all the complications. And now they're going full digital. So when you're buying something that's that expensive and that pricey, it's going to be very interesting to see how they can market that to the consumer. I also think, to your point, appointment viewing is making a huge comeback here. Okay. Personal training, any time of custom made to measure in the home. I think you're going to see on the high end, that's a whole new niche market and a whole new business model that people should start paying attention to.
That's great. So, obviously a call to arms, so to speak, around bolstering digital, prioritizing that, figuring out, where are the gaps that maybe your store experience could only provide to carry that into digital. But the reality is eventually, more stores are going to be reopening. So I guess my question for you is, what should be the balance as far as developing that playbook, like that the Nikes of the world, the Starbuckses of the world have started to develop, because a lot of the people watching right now, they're retail executives of varying, business sizes. So, their ability to put together that playbook maybe of varying degrees. But what do you think should really go into that plan based on where we are right now?
The biggest issue is safety. I'm out here in Arizona, and so our impact of pandemic and COVID-19 has been much less severe than most people in the nation. So if you're in the tri-state area, there's a lot of fear, and legitimately so. So, making your customer feel safe, that you have a plan and you care about them and their fear, and making sure that they are healthy. Now, can you guarantee the health of every single consumer that comes in your door? You can't. And that's where a lot of these businesses are going to run into trouble, because they're trying to protect their staff, their consumer, and it's so expensive. And how fast can these stores retrofit? You know, going in the CVS and having the PlexiGuard, or, you know, everything that it takes to retrofit a store or a restaurant. I mean, that's a whole other issue for another day, or hotels. So I think packaging becomes very important. I think, you know, health and safety become at the forefront before anything else. And also supply chain. You know, a lot of consumers are forced to trade down right now simply because the brand and the product that they love and desire isn't available. And it'll be interesting to see how long we're like, oh, well, you know what? I'll do the generic. I can handle that. And will that be an impact to brands? That's something that I think is interesting.
Yeah, those are some interesting points, because I know that one thing that I've been thinking about, like from my own personal perspective as a consumer, being a lot more thoughtful about the decisions that I make as a buyer. Like, do I really need this right now? Even though, you know, we do have e-commerce, it's as easy as, you know, click to buy. But I've noticed I'm more thinking about the upside. Who is fulfilling this? What kind of situation are they in? You know, just so I can buy this like one thing that I just, you know, it's on sale and I might as well. And I'm bored. So do you think that that's going to be, that if that's going to tie into the consumer value set moving forward? Or do you think this is more of like a temporary case of like, oh no, like people are getting sick and like they're dying, so I need to be thoughtful? Or is this going to have a more long-term impact for retailers' strategies, how they treat their employees, sustainability, all of those other underlying layers?
Sure. You know, it's so interesting because this is very different than 2008, and it's very different than 9/11. It's like both of those times 20. So I think the fear, I mean, this has changed everything, and it will change everything about the way we shop and about the way we buy. Personally, I know that sustainability is very important to a certain consumer demographic out there, and they're very thoughtful. But if you can't feed your family and you don't have a job and you can't pay your mortgage, that's out the window. You know, I don't care about saving whales if I can't feed my kids.
100%.
And I'm terrible, but you know what? I own it. So I you know, that's what I do. I study consumer behavior. And there's certain things when you're faced with making a decision for your family's health and safety and well-being, you know, those other sustainable brands have less impact and less cachet. I do think people will be more thoughtful about their purchasing behavior. And I think there'll be a support for local stores and local businesses, because people want to get out of their house and they want to support their home where they've been forced to be in now for some time. So I think it gives consumers a fresh pair of eyes about their living space, what they need. You know, oftentimes in retail, you know, you ask, what does the consumer need in her closet that she doesn't already have? And the answer right now is nothing.
Yeah.
You know, like you're taking stock. I mean, a lot of people are redoing their closets if they have the time. I'm not so inclined, but you take a look at, you know, what do you really need? Truly, what do you really need? And for a lot of people, that's hand sanitizer and toilet paper and Wi-Fi. So from a consumer space, for a while, I think for the next year or so, things are going to get very dicey on what people consider discretionary.
Very interesting. But so to that end, what will drive brand equity, brand value moving forward? I know we talked a little bit about, you know, what will this mean for certain categories of luxury brands? But I mean, what other factors do you think will play into consumers' minds as they determine who they do business with moving forward?
I think it's how empathetic the brand is and how thoughtful they are. I mean, everyone is home right now getting 50 emails a day in their inbox with discounts. And the way that you craft that message to the consumer, I think, is very critical. And they're going to remember that. They're going to remember during a pandemic if it's like, hey, 40% off and it's, you know, spring break or whatever. So I think that consumers, you know, never underestimate them and how they're going to react to being sold to, especially, you know, a Gen Z or especially millennials. And they're very reactive to that. And so if you're sensitive and thoughtful to the consumer's needs, also how you treat your employees. Are you laying them off? Are you taking government loan money and you don't really need it? And let me tell you, there are a lot of folks out there that pay attention to that. Universities, big businesses, certain restaurant chains. So if people forget that retail is the largest private employer in the United States. Those people are going to remember who laid them off and why. So I really believe that there's going to be a whole renewed sense of empathy towards retail, restaurant, hotel, all that staffing. And people remember what brands stepped up and what brands left them. Right.
And probably greater criticism of, are you being legit right now? Or is this just PR speak? Or is this just, some tactic in your playbook and you're not actually following through? I know I personally have been tracking that from a marketing perspective for a while now, but especially now, like is this being carried through in every piece of your organization? So it'll be interesting to see how that rises to the top. Exactly. All right, excellent, Kristin. Well, we had a fantastic conversation, covered a lot of ground in such a short amount of time. I feel like we can keep going, but any parting words for everyone watching right now? Again, looking at this through the lens of, these are executives who are trying to figure out their best path forward. They may have varying levels of their playbook done, maybe starting to consider reopening stores, maybe they're not quite sure their first step. I mean, any words of advice?
What I'm hearing the most from everyone I talk to, from C-level down to line employees, is anxiety. And there's so much anxiety out there on behalf of the consumer, on behalf of the store owner, on behalf of the executive team, on behalf of the line employee. There's so much fear. And so what I would advise is to be honest and communicate as much as you possibly can. And here's the thing, we don't know. And that's okay. That's okay to communicate that to your staff. We don't know what's going to happen. And so this is what we're going to do going forward. I'm going to tell you be as honest as you can, over communicate as much as you can, and be as forthright as you can, and have some empathy. Everyone's scared, everyone's frightened. And I think this is truly, affecting everybody. It's not just a regional thing. It's, everyone is affected in more ways than you may even know. And so I would just keep that in mind, and empathy always wins. You can't lose a brand base from not having empathy for your consumer and for your staff. And that would be, it sounds a little holistic, but I truly believe that will rule the day, and we just have to wait this thing out.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the perfect way to close, because like you said, it's something that's impacting everyone, and the way we treat each other does have a lasting impact in many ways, not just, where we spend our dollars, but where we put our minds, what we think about, how we treat each other. So great way to close it out, Kristin. Thank you again so much for taking the time out to speak with me today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And stay safe.
Great. Yeah, it's you as well. And thanks everyone out there for watching. Take care.